Well, humans are incredibly unique, and we can see that by the environment we built, the things we invented. Other animals learn, other animals are social, but we became so deeply social and learned how to pass knowledge on from generation to generation, initially verbally, then in written form, and now we have the digital revolution. And so each generation builds on the next to help us not only build tools, but even ask questions about why are we here? What's our purpose? And so we're very different than all the other animals.
Are we going to ask you to support another campaign about empowering women and girls? Absolutely.
Because if everyone in the world thought of themselves as global citizens, it would help make sure that women and girls receive the education, opportunity, and respect they deserve.
Only global citizens can make global change.
Every summer, I try to do a little extra reading. Here's a few books I've read recently that you might enjoy. On Immunity by Eula Biss. She explains the history of vaccination, why children who don't get vaccinated can even affect those who are vaccinated. She's a very good writer. I wish I could write as nicely as she writes. Should We Meet by Václav Smil. It's provocative the way he does the title, as though passing the responsibility to the reader, where we know it's pretty hard for people to give up meat. There are books that touch on this topic that don't have numbers in them, but this is Smil. You are going to get the numbers. You might even get a few sentences in between the numbers. How to Lie with Statistics by Daryl Huff. Being able to understand what you're looking at and being willing to say, hey, where did that come from? Is that accurate? It's a quick read. It's got a lot of good examples in it. It's a trip to the past, even though the basic points it makes are still as valid today. What If by Randall Munroe. It's a very clever way of getting you to think about various scientific things going on. This idea of when you say glass half empty, do you mean empty as in perfect vacuum? And all of a sudden, if there was a glass sitting there where you put the water on the top and the vacuum on the bottom and the vacuum on the top and the water on the bottom, this is clever. Those are the kind of questions that somebody with a good mind who's trying to figure out if they really understand, that's the kind of question you should ask yourself. Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Broche. She's pretty creative and humorous about making fun of herself and revealing her inner thoughts. There was one thing about the dog where, this is one that I told Melinda to read, where the dog's getting confused where they're moving. And so she's trying to simulate what the dog's thinking. And her dog, maybe it's true, it's one of the most inept, impossible dogs to ever take care of. And finally, The Magic of Reality by Richard Dawkins. In science, we're all kids. I mean, a good scientist is somebody who's redeveloped the chain of reasoning of why we know what we know from scratch many times, just to see where there's holes or alternate possibilities. It can never hurt to reread these things and think through what you're learning. We can observe way more stuff than you'd imagine, and we've made more sense out of the stuff we can observe than you can imagine. So quite a range there in terms of fun to learn, fun to know about. I hope you enjoy them as much as I did. Well, I'm very optimistic about where the world will be 50 years from now. I hope I'm around to see it, but I think we can already see the shape of things in some ways. The human population, which was growing at a very rapid rate, is now growing at a slower rate because as we become successful, families have chosen to have less children. And so we can see a peak population that makes it possible to think about living within the resource constraints that we have. We can also see a decline in violence. It's amazing now because we hear about all the violent things around the world, but every century the world has had a lot less war, a lot less violent deaths, and we've come to value the work that's being done but in other countries, making great products, and really think together about humanity's common future. The pace of innovation will need to surprise us in some ways. What form this great energy source will be that will avoid us destroying the environment. That's an invention that's very, very important. How much care will we give towards making sure that the poorest several billion are not completely left out? There's been a little bit of progress there, but the inequity level still should concern us quite a bit. And then there are things that are harder to predict. For example, how important will robots be in 50 years? Maybe 20 years ago, people, when they first heard about robots, thought, wow, that's pretty scary. What does it mean? But then when it didn't really happen, they stopped thinking about it. It's almost like only a curiosity in the movies or toys. And yet, clearly in the decades ahead, the cost, the capabilities will mimic what we've seen in science fiction. And so we'll have to see, how do we take advantage of that? As we're living longer, how do we find fulfillment? What does a working career look like in terms of timing? The world will have aged on average, and that brings with it very interesting problems. And so it's not without challenges, but the path of extended lifespan, more science, more global understanding, sense of our common humanity, more education, more ability to watch a great course and not give up the curiosity that you're born with, but try to think about the world and where it can go and how you can contribute to it. I think all of these things are taking more advantage of our innate capabilities and will allow us to make 50 years from now a far better place than even what we have today.
So, Mr. Gates, the first question is for you. Why are partnerships such as the one between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Canadian government so important to improving maternal, newborn, and child health?
Well, really starting in 2010, the goals of the Gates Foundation and the goals of the Canadian government in helping out poor countries really got very much into alignment. This idea of helping mothers and children, improving nutrition. We've seen how dramatic the benefits of those things are. And so we've ended up working together on a lot of programs, buying vaccines, nutrition, Global Fund, which goes after malaria, which is a huge killer of children and causes lots of problems during pregnancy. And so we've been learning from each other. Canada's gotten out in front on things like their grand challenges that includes saving minds, understanding how mental development is held back if you don't have the right type of diet. And it's been exciting to see that the number of kids who die, the number who don't get enough to eat, all of these things, there's been pretty rapid improvement. So it's a very positive story. We're committed to keep learning, take the countries where things have gone well and spread those practices to the other countries. So it's been a very strong partnership. We've been as aligned with Canada as any partner, and very enthused about what we're able to achieve.
Prime Minister, why is maternal, newborn, and child health one of Canada's top development priorities?
Well, I think Canadians have heard me say this many times. This is an area where, with surprisingly little investment, we can make an enormous difference. I've given the example of giving a few vitamins that can, reduce child mortality by some 25%. This is a case where we can go into the developing world and literally take cases where people will die and make them live and make them have hope to be productive citizens. And when you're dealing with mothers and children, you are dealing with the most fundamental building block of society. And if anything else is good is going to happen in the world, it starts there. And so I say it's something we can do, we should do, and we're able to make a difference. And that is what is so exciting about it, because we see that difference happen.
Mr. Gates, what are your top priorities in this area and why?
Well, my wife and I wrote our annual letter for the foundation talking about where we think the world can get to in the next 15 years. And the aspiration is that in the same way in the last 25 years we cut these childhood deaths in half, from 12 million a year down to 6 million, we think now in 15 years it can be cut in half again, so from 6 million down to 3 million. Now there are several elements to that. We've got to get all the vaccines that U.S. and Canadian children take for granted that they get those out to all the children of the world who are actually more vulnerable to these diarrheal and pneumonia diseases. And the recent extremely successful fundraising for the Global Alliance for Vaccines that Canada was a very large and generous participant in, that lays the foundation that actually in the next 5 years we'll get those vaccines out to all those children. We need to make progress on malaria in Africa. That's a significant part of the children's deaths. And so we've had discussions today, meeting with the experts and talking about what goals should be set and how are we going to achieve that. Overall, health is an enabling factor. And the goal here is to have these countries be self-sufficient. And we've seen Brazil, Mexico, many countries, India in the reasonably near future will be self-sufficient. And so even the countries in Africa that are still in a tough situation, if we lend them a hand and help out with these really central issues, starting with health, but then education, agriculture, then they will get to the point where they're completely self-sufficient. So in 15 years, I think there'll be very few countries left that are in need of aid. At least a half of the ones that we're helping today will be graduating, and that's great success. A lot of healthy children contributing to the world.
Prime Minister, what are you announcing today and why is it significant?
Well, look, we're just reiterating today what we've been doing, which is contributing to a range of causes on child, newborn and maternal health, obviously including some of the things that Bill has talked about, vaccine support, many things I've been announcing around the world. We just want to keep pushing this forward at every opportunity. We're in the process of developing something internationally called the new Millennium Development Goals, and I think we're both a bit worried there's a bit of a lack of focus creeping in, and we just want to keep our country, which has supported this so strongly, and the world focused on the really big things where we can make transformational changes to the planet. And so that's really what we're doing today. And I just want to spend a moment, if I could just, talking about the Gates Foundation while Bill is here. Look, it's been just, Gates Foundation has been a fantastic partner. I don't think most people really appreciate the effect the Gates Foundation itself has had in the international development area. It's brought a kind of a business-oriented rigor, focus on results, achievements. It has a range of capacities all the way from scientific research through to delivery, and of course a scale of funding that is really unique. So it's been a great partner for Canada, but it's a great organization that's really helping the world, and we're really honored that Bill could join us just as Melinda joined us for the conference back in Toronto in May.
And after I dump this bucket of ice on my head, I get to nominate 3 new people to challenge. So I'm going to challenge Bill Gates, my partner at Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, and Netflix's founder and CEO, Reed Hastings.
I'm glad to give to ALS. It's a great cause, but I want to accept this challenge. I want to do it better than it's been done. Been working on this, got this design. There we go. Yeah. It's going to be great. I'm here to join the people bringing attention to Lou Gehrig's disease by taking the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I'm going to challenge 3 more people. Elon Musk, Ryan Seacrest, and Chris Anderson of TED. Consider yourself challenged. You have 24 hours. Good luck.